Hello Year 10. Welcome back after the Christmas break. I hope you're feeling well rested. Unfortunately, this obviously isn't the start to the term that we had all hoped for, but I'm sure that we can get lots of learning done remotely, and I will be available on Teams during your lesson as well if you want to have a chat with me. Your lesson today will be taking a look at some of the things we started at the end of last term. So how does climate change affect tropical storms? So that will be the first half of the lesson. And the second part of the lesson will look at the effects of and the responses to tropical storms. But obviously we need to start our lesson, as we always do, with a jog your memory task. So quick read through the questions. What type of plate boundary is this? What 4 conditions are needed for a tropical storm to form? What is the name of the scale that measures the magnitude of earthquakes? And for our geographical skills question, you don't need to copy out the whole table, that's fine. You just need to work out what the interquartile range is for River B. So in the front of your book, put today's date and the title. Jog your memory, or do now, either one is fine, and then answer these questions in full sentences. Pause the video now while you do that. So the answers are, the type boundary was a conservative plate boundary, so this is the boundary where you have plates either sliding past one another in opposite directions or travelling in the same direction but at different speeds. The question about tropical storm formation, you need low air pressure, you need warm ocean temperatures, high humidity in the ocean air and low wind shear. The name of the scale that measures the magnitude of earthquakes is the Richter scale. There's obviously the moment magnitude scale as well, but this measures the amount of energy released, and this question very specifically asked for the magnitude. What do we use to measure the magnitude? And that's the Richter scale. And your interquartile range for River B is 9. So in today's lesson we're going to consolidate the work we did about climate change and tropical storms, and then you're going to categorise the effects and responses to a tropical storm. A new title in your book, please. How does climate change affect tropical rainstorms? How does climate change affect tropical rainstorms? There's an article on the next 3 slides. I want you to read the whole article and then answer these questions in your book. How could climate change affect tropical storms? What is the evidence for and against climate change influencing tropical storms? And what are the issues with the data? Now, we did have a quick look at this in class, but we didn't get the work down into your book, so it's really important that you work your way through the article and then answer these 3 questions. Obviously, read the questions carefully before you start reading the article, otherwise you'll find that you'll have to read the article maybe even 2 or 3 times, okay? So make sure you understand the questions and then continue through the next 3 slides, pausing the video whenever you need to. I will pause on each one myself about 5 seconds to give you time to reach your own pause button. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the next slide. And move again. And again. You'll have noticed as I move through the slides there that there's a number of words that I've highlighted in red. They're just words that I thought you might need explaining. So anything that's highlighted in red in the text, I've put them also on the right hand side with an explanation of that word. So for example, in the text we can see the acronym AGW, and on the right hand side in the box I've put that means anthropogenic global warming. That obviously means global warming caused by people, anthropogenic. So how does climate change affect tropical rainstorms? And we're going to do a little practice question. It's only 3 marks here. I'd like you to write the question into your book. And the question is, describe the annual frequency of North Atlantic tropical storms between 1925 and 2005. So our command word here is describe. All you need to do is say what you see on the graph. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to give reasons for why that's happening. All you need to do is state what the pattern is, the general pattern, what's happening. What's happening to the frequency? So that is how often storms are occurring. It'd be a really good idea if you could state the difference between 1925 and 2005. So what's the difference between those 2 dates? And be specific, give some evidence from the graph. Okay? Is there anywhere where there's been a particular drop or a particularly rapid rise? Can you give some numbers from the graph at particular date points? Increases, decreases, that sort of thing. So use some evidence from the graph. Describe what you see, and that's a 3-mark question. Pause the video now while you have a go at that in your book. So for your next task, what I would like you to do is, using the information that you have learned so far and anything else that you happen to find on the internet, I'd like you to create a mind map of how climate change will affect tropical rainstorms. I've had some really great examples in from people of mind maps that I asked you to do over the holidays. So they're really good, and I'd like to see more of the same, please. So a 1-page mind map of how climate change will affect tropical rainstorms. Okay, so I've put some text on there. You should have some information in your books from before the Christmas break, and obviously the article that you've just read has absolutely loads of information. It's jam-packed with information. Okay, diagrams are always good in a mind map, bullet points, linking things together. So anything that you can put on there, it would be great to have one of those mind maps in your book. Now I've put a couple of extra links on here as well. It's an extension task. You don't have to read these articles, but they're quite interesting, and I really think that they would further your understanding of tropical rainstorms and the effects that they can have on people and the landscape and buildings. So if you have time, it would be great if you could have a look at those articles. If you're doing this only from the video, you won't be able to click on the link here, but when you look on YouTube, I have put these links in the description underneath the pane where the video displays. You can also access it on the PowerPoint and the PDF file, so there's lots of different ways to access those articles. So we're finished with the how climate change affects tropical storms, and we're going to have a look at a particular case study now. So how can we predict and prepare for tropical storms? And we're going to look at categorising the effects and responses to a tropical storm. This is something you've had quite a lot of practice at with our earthquake case studies, so I'm confident that you'll be able to do this quite easily. So a new title in your book, Effects of and Responses to Tropical Storms. What I'd like you to do, and this is a really important geographical skill, is to analyse this photograph. What can you see? What are the effects of this tropical storm? And this one here is Typhoon Haiyan, which I mentioned just before we broke up for Christmas. So this is in the Philippines. Now, I've given you a couple of examples. Okay, so up at the top there are some palm trees, and I've said that coconut farmers may lose income due to damaged crops. Now, I've inferred this information. I don't actually know that that is a coconut farm. I could be completely wrong. but it might be. So I've inferred that information. For the next point, buildings are destroyed. Well, I can see that. I can quite clearly see that those buildings have been destroyed. So there are two different types of information that we can get from this photograph. But there's things that we can actually see have definitely happened, and there's things that we might be able to work out or infer from the evidence in the photograph. So I'd like you to pause the video and write into your books 4 different effects of tropical storms. If you can, it'd be brilliant if you could categorise them into primary and secondary effects, remembering that primary effects are things that happen as a direct result of the natural disaster. For example, the collapsed buildings that we can see in the picture here. And secondary effects are things like the cost of rebuilding those collapsed buildings. Okay, so I want 4 different effects, different ones to those that I put on the screen for you. Pause the video and have a go at that now. So here are some that I came up with. I don't know how you got on. Hopefully you did quite well. I'd like you to check your work against the suggestions that I've put here. You may already have some of these. You may have completely different ones. That's fine. I'd like you, as I mentioned on the previous slide, I'd like you to categorise these. So get these points down into your book, okay, and then categorise them. So additional points are: injuries could be caused by collapsing buildings. Power and communications infrastructure may be damaged. I've put an arrow there to a sloping telegraph pole. It hasn't completely fallen over, although the one next to it, further down, is in a much worse state. So I think we can infer that communications are probably down. Businesses will lose income due to building damage, lost stock and lost trading opportunities. Again, I've assumed this. I can't actually see any businesses there, but I think it's safe to assume that there will be something close by. And again, I've inferred that people will lose their jobs and that homelessness will increase. So get those down into your book and categorise them as primary and secondary effects. I've just put them on here for you, so check your work again. I've indicated which ones are primary, which ones are secondary, so if you have a different colour pen, that would be great. Just check your work and make any corrections that you need to. So we did quite a lot of work on immediate and long-term responses. We started with our Nepal and Chile earthquakes, and you spent some time categorising those on a worksheet, which you should have in your book now. So I've given you some examples here of immediate responses: administering medical aid, providing temporary shelters, delivering water and food. Long-term responses are rebuilding infrastructure, improving buildings and improving forecasting techniques. Your task for this section of the lesson, so I would like you to categorise the responses that I put in this list into immediate or long-term. It's up to you how you do it. You can write one big list and then categorise them one by one. You can write 2 lists, one for immediate, one for long-term. You can bullet point it, do it as a table. Really doesn't matter, okay? Do whatever works for you. So get all of those points into your book and then categorise them as immediate or long-term. Pause the video while you do that and then come back to check your work. How did you do? Hope you did quite well. So using a different colour pen, check your answers, make any corrections if you need to. Pause the video while you do it. This is an exam style question. It's very similar to one that came up in a recent paper that I was looking at, and it's very similar to the sort of thing that you can expect to answer in mocks and your actual exam when they happen. So have a look at the data in the table below and then answer the question. Don't forget to write the question in your book, otherwise it will not make any sense when you look back at the work later. Is there a relationship between the category of storm and the number of deaths? Use the data to support your answer. Now you could, if you have time and you're getting through the work quite quickly, by all means do copy out the data. I think it would be a useful addition to your book. You don't absolutely have to copy it out, but I do think it would be a good idea if you have time to get that into your book as well. So your question is there a relationship between the category of storm and the number of deaths? So first of all, it's a 2-mark question. So first of all, you need to decide if there is a relationship. So as the category of storm increases, are there more deaths, for example? So is there a pattern? And then whatever your answer is, you need to use some data from the table. So you state what the relationship is, if there is one, and then you use something from the table to support that argument. Stop the video while you get this work into your book and then come back to check your answer. So on this data, there is no clear relationship between the category of storm and the estimated number of deaths. As the category of storm increases, the number of deaths does not always increase. For example, the lowest number of estimated deaths was during Typhoon Mayon. The tropical storm was a Category 4 storm with an estimated 4 deaths. However, both Category 1 storms caused a higher number of estimated deaths despite being less intense. So I think it's possibly a little bit of a tricky one to answer, but you do need some practice at analysing data. So use a different colour pen to mark your work. I'd be interested to know how you got on, and I will be asking you this at the end of the lesson when we meet up on Teams. So why do the effects of and responses to tropical storms vary between countries? As with our earthquake case studies, we know that there are other factors that can affect the severity of a natural disaster. Take a few moments now to think about what these might be in the case of a typhoon, and then move on once you're ready to do the next task. So another new title in your book, Factors Influencing the Number of People Affected by a Storm. So I'd like you to sort the factors on this slide into those which will mean more people will be affected and those which will mean fewer people will be affected. Now you can either do it as 2 lists, you can do it as a table, you can copy it out exactly as it is and colour code it. If you have a printer, you could just print this and stick it in your book and then colour code it. If you don't have colours, you can just put P for physical and human geography when we're categorising them. Okay, so I want 2 lists or colour coding. I've chosen red for those factors which mean more people will be affected, and I've chosen green for those factors that mean fewer people will be affected. So for example, in the case of typhoons, our very first point there is higher land. So thinking about the effects of a typhoon, we know that sometimes we have storm surges. So if you're on higher land, you are less likely to be affected than someone who is on lower lying land. So for higher land, fewer people will be affected. So I would colour that in green. So I'd like you to go through and either colour code or list them, stop the video while you do that and then come back to check your work. If you were also able to categorise them into physical and human, I've put the answers on here for you as well. So using a different colour pen, check your answers and make any corrections as necessary. Just pause the video and then come back once you've finished. You could read the information on this page, that would be amazing. I'm not going to read every single word to you, okay? Now, to consolidate what you've learned today, I'd like you to have a go at a 6-mark exam style question. So in your book, you can write the title homework and then copy out the question below. So suggest why the number of deaths caused by tropical storms varies between countries. Okay, so you've got the information from the previous slide about what can affect the severity or the factors affecting the severity of the effects, and also the knowledge that you have from our Nepal and Chile case studies, because we did a comparison between the two countries, if you remember their responses. So look back at your work on that as well if you want to. That might help you answer this question. It's a 6-mark question, so I'm expecting you to give 2 reasons and fully explain them. I would recommend that you choose one physical factor, so the landscape, and one human factor. We've done paragraph structures a lot last term. I've put a little reminder here for you. Don't forget to do it, okay? It's so important when you're answering these exam style questions. So paragraph 1 should be your introduction. Paragraph 2 should be an explanation of your 2 factors, and paragraph 3 should be a conclusion. Now I've put an assignment on Teams for you, so I would like you to upload this when you're finished, Word document or a picture of written work in your book, I don't mind which, so whatever's easiest for you. If you have any questions, email me during the lesson, or if you are able to join via Teams, that'd be great. I will see you there. Good luck, everybody.